Hey Justin, I sent you a co-host invite. Hey Justin, how are you?
Hey Malika, how you doing today?
How you doing? Funny thing is, I was going to send you an inbox about co-hosting. This place, and here you are. Here you are. But how you doing?
I'm good. How about you?
I wanted, I'm good. Just ready to show some love to Larry Bird and that era of the Celtics.
Oh yeah.
That era is one of my favorite eras. The '80s, when the Celtics and the Lakers um, were ruling, and Magic and Larry Bird were going back and forth.
Oh yeah.
So I wanted to show them that they had both had great teams
Mm-hmm.
that were formed to their strengths,
Yes.
and I wanted to show both of them. I wanted to show that era with Kevin McHale, because when Kevin McHale showed up, that's when things started popping,
Oh yeah.
and really like it's funny, like when I look at today's Celtics fans, it's like I don't think y'all understand just how great um Larry Bird was, man. Like when I look at today's fan, period, I like Larry Bird was one of the greatest big men, um, like 6'9" and above, you know,
Mm-hmm.
play the game. So I just wanted to have this chat. And so thank you for being here. So I'm not talking, so I'm not giving a dissertation, as I call it. Um, I don't like dissertations. So um, anyway, you have been doing doing like some reaction videos. So talk a little bit about some of the stuff you do. As I send some tweets to try to.
Yeah, on my YouTube channel, I've just been doing just like a lot of reactions regarding like some old school basketball and stuff like that. Just did like a Penny Hardaway video. I put it out the other day for the young generation that don't really knew how great Penny Hardaway was and why his jersey is still popular to this day. I get a lot of comments from like people saying, "Man, I love that you got the Penny Hardaway jersey." And it's just for the young generation to just understand how great he was and when he was healthy. If like I was saying, he could have been one of the greatest if he would have stayed healthy his whole career and everything. I did the '86 Celtics too. That one did really well because a lot of people commented regarding the '86 Celtics as being one of the greatest teams of all time.
Yeah, it's one of the greatest teams ever. Is the '86 Celtics, no doubt.
Yes, it is. And, yeah, we had Larry Bird. It was the first year Kevin McHale started because he's been a six man.
Yep.
Um, they acquired Bill Walton from, I think he was with the Clippers at the time, too. And he was, still wasn't like the same Bill Walton that we seen in Portland and UCLA and stuff, but he still was like a guy with a high IQ and everything. The way he passes and go into the post and plays defense too as well. Dennis Johnson, the way he was an underrated player. A lot of people don't understand how good this dude was before he went to Boston. He was a Finals MVP with the Sonics in '79, so he was a really good player.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
Robert Parrish, I mean, anchoring the defense and was hustle. He will hustle, get the rebounds too as well. Danny Age, man, he was a pest, but he could shoot that
Yeah,
three though.
Danny Ainge did the dirty did a lot of the dirty work. That's what I
Yes,
call it. Yeah, he did the dirty work.
he did.
Yes. To this day, like it's funny. I saw this interview between Jordan, who was my goat,
hmm
and Stephen Curry, and they were talking about Danny Ainge on a golf course.
Yes.
Like they both like playing Danny Ainge because he talked so much junk on the golf
hmm
course.
hmm
And I thought it was hilarious because Steph Curry agreed and he looks forward to playing him. So I was
hmm
like, yeah, on the golf course, he was a hot mess. So,
Yes.
um, like, yeah, he was a hot mess. Let me just get out a few tweets and then We will um, get started. At the end of the day, these are also recorded for YouTube. And I wanted to make sure I get this one in before we go to a lot of the other teams. I
Yes.
spent so much time this summer going over the Lakers' history. Um,
Hmm.
and because of all the series that were surrounding the Lakers between Winning Time to Magic's documentary Responding to Winning Time,
Hmm.
the Lakers documentary Responding to Winning Time, speaking with Jeff Pearlman twice about Three Ring Circus, and then
Yes.
like his book on the Showtime Lakers. It was just a lot of like, so I just when I was like, you know what, I feel like I need to spend some time on the 29 other teams in the NBA in the history. So I'm glad that we are here to do that. And thanks everyone for tuning in to the Rewind, where we discuss basketball history, football history. We discuss sports history. We've been spending a lot of time on the NBA, and we previously done throwback rooms on the New Jersey, well, the Nets. We did the Nets to Jason Kidd era. And we are now here. We did the Philadelphia 76ers, Allen Iverson era. And now we are here to discuss the Boston Celtics Larry Bird era. I'm excited and ready to dive in and let's talk about it. And if you want to come on stage and discuss Larry Bird, feel free to do so. But Larry Bird, let's start from the beginning. Before we can jump right to the 86, let's start off with Larry Bird. Instead of starting him off in college, I mean, we're not, we're talking about his era of the Celtics, so we're not going to go that far back. Let's talk about him being drafted by Red in '78. Even though Red knew that Red Auerbach, we're referring to, of course, the great lead executive for the Celtics for decades. He drafted him even though Larry Bird was going to go back to college for his senior year. So that's why in '79, when Magic came out, it was like they were both rookies at the same time, even though Larry Bird was drafted the year before. Anything, Justin, you want to say about that portion of it? Larry Bird coming in, not really starting, even though he was drafted.
Yeah, yeah, he like you said it so well. Like he was drafted in '78 and decided to go back to college for one more year and everything before going into the NBA. And then Magic, got drafted in '79, and they both came together to the league and everything. Not to talk much about college and all that, they had that rivalry in that championship game that was like the most viewed, in college basketball history and everything. And both coming into the league, those Celtics at the time before Larry came in that previous year, they were not a great team. They had a losing record and everything. And, they got their fortune with Larry Bird, the great Red Auerbach. He was a really good general manager too. He was a head coach, but he was very smart with his IQ and knows what type of players he needs that could fit that Boston system that he was looking for and everything. But that's about it. You said everything on the nail and everything regarding about, you know, Larry Bird when he came in and everything, and we can talk more coming up. So,
Yeah, and the interesting thing about Red Auerbach, because I remember this era, and you had, it was the Larry Bird era when, like their team, quote unquote, they had leaders of Kevin McHale and
mm-hmm.
Larry Bird, and it was like, well, the white boys were pretty much running the team. I mean, and it was like Red Auerbach. Like it was like the stigma attached to to Red Auerbach about him bringing in like white players. Don't realize Red Auerbach fielded the first all black starting five.
Yep.
Um, so Red Auerbach just loved to win. You know what I mean? Like I think that even Bill Russell said, yeah, like he was progressive, I guess, for the time, but he made some statements here and there that were
Mm-hmm.
a little colorful, but it people the way he was portrayed isn't exactly the way people perceived him in the Larry Bird era isn't indicative of him his whole career when you go back and look at the team that was formed around Bill Russell,
Hmm.
and with Bill Russell being the lead of that team. So I'm gonna do a like a podcast looking at the history of Red Auerbach as a whole, and later. But today, yeah, that was a great draft. And when like in '79, and when Larry Bird came in, like one of my least favorite Celtics of all time is ML Carr. I detest that man with every fiber of my being. I just want to say this again. Honest Larry, I know you love Larry Bird, which is why I invited you to the stage. But Memo Carr, I just detest her with every fiber of my being. But Cedric Maxwell, who was really, I don't think people realize Cedric Maxwell was a bad boy.
Yes,
Like,
he was.
especially at that time. Like, Cedric Maxwell was a bad boy. Pete Maravich was still on the team. Gerald Henderson was there. Dave Cowens was
Hmm.
there. Um, Tiny Archibald was there. And, like, these players were older, right? So they definitely were stacked with some veterans, along with Cedric Maxwell, who was the man, and
Hmm.
Larry Bird. So you want to give some love to like Cedric Maxwell before we continue and get started. Before we continue,
Cornbread. Yep, cornbread.
cornbread was yeah,
That's
man.
he had a funny story. He said one day, like Larry Bird was coming into the gym and stuff like that, and then like you know how like us brothers is like oh man this this white guy can't really play and all that we're gonna show him we're gonna play this one on one. Man, he said Larry Bird when he hit that three it went in, and then he hit a deep three went in, and he hit another three it went in. Maxwell was like, this dude's gonna be a hell of a player. He is gonna be a hell of a player. So
I mean, when you think about it, he had to constantly. Larry Bird has to constantly prove himself.
yes.
And because like he had it was the stigma of him being quote unquote the white boy. But he played, he played with players of all cultures. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
He wanted to play, with players that didn't exactly look like him because he really
Hmm.
wanted to pick up the game. So I don't think people stereotyped him, but they didn't know who they were messing with. Like,
Hmm. Yes.
obviously, the hick from French Lick. You know what I mean? Like, was he wasn't like he wasn't, your everyday he wasn't that dude that you're gonna sit there and intimidate.
Yeah.
And when he came in, the coach was Bill Fitch. He was
Yep.
coaching that year. And in 1979, 1980, like their record was 61-21.
Yep.
So they finished first in their division in 1979, 1980. So for a player, for Larry Bird to start, because usually when you have enough, a player of his caliber start, when you think about the NBA now, the top players usually go to teams unless you had those weird years with the Warriors, when they took a dip, with
Hmm.
some injuries, and then they ended up drafting Wiseman, and you know what I mean. Like,
Hmm.
like, but other than that, you have usually the teams at the bottom that are getting these top players. The year before, when you look at, the year before they were 29-53 and
Yeah.
78-79. That's the year they drafted Bird, and he didn't start with them. But when he did start playing with Cedric Maxwell the following year, it was, they basically 61-21. I mean, damn, that's impressive. They went all
Yes.
the way to the Eastern Conference Finals,
Yes.
against Philly. I mean, man, you know what I mean? And think about that. Like the previous, a few years before, though the previous year, he was competing against Magic in the
Hmm.
national championship game. And then he was on his way to that kind of pathway his first year as well. But Philly,
Hmm.
put their foot. Um, Philly had a stronghold on them at first. Like
Yes.
so. Um, that was yeah. Philly had a stronghold on them at first. That was Dr. J. In his era of the Philadelphia 76ers. And of course, Magic Johnson. We all know about the heroics of the Showtime Lakers and Magic Johnson as a rookie playing center and helping them win
Hmm.
their first championship. And the heck for French Lick had to sit there and watch that
Yeah.
because he didn't make it ready for the next year. When he was ready for the next year. They had all that. He had success out the gate, though. Like
Yes.
think about like the impact of him impacting and being on the winning team. But it's not like they didn't have anybody there. Like we said, they had Cedric Maxwell there, and they just couldn't get past the 76ers. The next
Yeah.
year they got picked. They got Kevin McHale, and he was basically, that was his rookie year. Um, and they still had Tiny. Gerald Henderson, of course, was there. Robert Parrish came
Hmm.
um, that year, and I remember like when Robert Parrish came in, wasn't there some controversy on his training or like this how in shape he was? Like coming in.
Yeah, technically there was some like news here and there about like the way he came into the training camp and everything, and like, but like at the same time, he was like saying something in a quote when he was with Golden State before he went to Boston, that he was thinking about retirement because he was losing passion for the game and all that. He didn't really enjoy playing, and the guys he was playing with was very selfish and individualistic and wasn't playing as a team. So like it was just like he was like losing that passion of the game, and he probably thought Boston was going to be the same way. Now, Red Auerbach did pull off one of the great, like, people thought Red was crazy for getting Kevin McHale and Parrish in that trade because they had Joe Barry Carroll and they had the 13th pick too as well with Ricky Brown, and everybody thought that Barry Carroll was going to be something. He's going to be the next one. And the way Red pulled that trade off, because he said he saw something in McHale, he saw something in Paris that he likes that could fit into that Boston system. So that's still one of the greatest trades of all time. Like Red Auerbach, he's known for that, like pulling these ridiculous type of trades. Like we see how Danny Ainge be doing that. He kind of took a little bit from Red Auerbach in
Yeah, he
terms of how
learned from Red. He
he learned
learned
it
from
from
watching
Red
Red.
Auerbach. Yeah.
Yeah, he learned on the
And
job.
hmm and it's one of it's like you was thinking, man, that's a bad trade at the time, but then years
Mm-hmm.
later you're like, man, Wade did a great job. So
And it's funny when you think about it. You think about talk radio at the time. Like Boston. When his trade went down. Can you imagine? Like, because that was you have talk radio now, but it's different. Now it's
mhm.
like everybody tweeting and like and you see in the tweets what people are thinking. But when you look at that team in 1980 and 81, you had Larry Bird, the starters, Larry Bird, Tiny Archibald. You had Cedric Maxwell,
Mhm.
Chris Ford started, and Robert Parrish. This is the team that ended up winning the finals that year. So this was, and they went 62-20. Like,
Mhm.
they were tearing up, tearing
Yes.
up the league. Another 60-win season. Like, 79, 60-win season. Couldn't get past Philly. 80, another 60-win season. And they get to the finals and they do not face the Lakers, which is who who Larry Bird wanted. They do not face
Yes.
the Lakers. So let's talk. This is the season they got Parrish. You know what I mean, and that helped them. Get to the finals. That trade. So let's talk about the impact of that trade. Of course, Larry Bird won Rookie of the Year,
Yep.
and and Magic, was told about that. Um, during the finals. If you
Hmm.
look at and there's rumors that that is what helped him turn around, have such an amazing performance to prove that he felt like he also had a great season. Also, Casey Jones was the coach in that year. So you had, oh no, Casey Jones was an assistant. Sorry,
Yes.
I got too excited. Bill Fitch was was still the coach in 80-81 when they won that first championship. So what would you like to add about the 80-81, that year of basically the Celtics first championship in a while,
Yes.
and Larry Bird's first. So yeah.
Yes, it just tells you about just good things to come. Pretty much, what's going to happen in the '80s. It's like Magic, like Magic Bowl when they came in, they wanted to win right away. They were all about winning and all about team basketball and everything. So with the Lakers winning the previous year, and then seeing the Celtics, they really wanted the Lakers in the finals and everything. But yeah, that year, that it was just a really good year for the Celtics. Now that and Larry Bird's first championship and all that. He didn't win Finals MVP. It was Cornbread Maxwell
Yeah,
winning Finals
Cornbread was on
MVP.
one though.
He was
Cornbread
on
was
one.
on one.
Yes. Now,
I
if
think
you
people need
watch,
to look him up.
you have to look up Cornbread Maxwell. He was a monster. People don't give him a lot of credit. He was a monster.
He was
Uh,
greatly by injuries. He was one
yep.
of the players where you didn't really see his full potential that he could have, because
Yep.
of injuries. And part of some people suspect that part of the injury was the effort he could have been putting in off seasons, like
Hmm.
help his strengthening. Um, but yeah, he was a beast during these years. Like he
Yes.
was one of those players that had a few years of good run. And yeah, this was one of those years for him. But go ahead.
Exactly. And if you don't, and I will recommend people to watch the 81 Eastern Conference Finals. That's one of the best conference finals I've seen. Just I'm a young guy, so I'll go back and watch like history. It's one of the best of all time because it was just back and forth, and then it came down to a decisive game 7. And you have to watch the Eastern Conference Finals. It's like one of the best, and just seeing Boston win, and then going to the finals against the Houston Rockets and winning the finals 4-2. So that Celtics team that year, they were a really complete team. If you look at the offensive rating, they were one of the top 5 teams in the NBA. You look at the
And
defensive
defensive
rating,
rating. Yeah, they
and fourth, and it's like the net rating, they were top 3. They were a
yes.
complete team,
They
complete.
were a complete team from top to bottom. You got a player like Larry Bird in your team, but you have Cedric Maxwell taking the finals MVP. They were a complete team on both sides of the ball. And I remember because that was a time when there was still a lot going on socially when you
Yep.
think about Boston. So I wasn't particularly excited about Boston winning back then. But now as you look back and we reflect on it, it was a powerful, great time. And
Yep.
I mean, like, the Lakers winning in 80, and the Celtics winning in 81.
Hmm.
Um, and that was the first year with Parrish, and I'm sure, what I mean, like that, that helped Parrish, you know, and continue to, like, find his love of the game playing with the
Yep.
Celtics. Like, he got that second win in his career.
Hmm.
Um, and then the next year, 81, 82, the Celtics had a 63 win season.
Hmm.
Again, they were fourth, and they were top five in offense. They were top six in defense, and had it in first in net rating, in the league.
Yep.
Like, Phil Fitch was still the coach, but they ended up winning 63 games.
Yes.
That's that's insane.
It's crazy.
Like, they won 63 games. And Kevin McHale started 33 games that season. So he was making more of a, more of an impact here. Cedric,
Yep.
of course, started 73. Tiny, I'm glad Tiny was with them these years.
Yes.
Because he was at the tail end, and they had Danny Ainge. Um,
Yes.
so so let's talk about this team because they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah.
But they didn't get past the Eastern Conference Finals. And when you look at the playoffs, like they played the Bullets, and then
Hmm.
they faced the 76ers was something else back then. We're
Yes.
going to do a room on the Julius Irving, Dr. J period, but I want to go back to this era of the 76ers,
Hmm.
because I don't think people, yeah, they were from, like again, knocked out the, they knocked out the Celtics. It was a
Yep.
7-game series. Like, that's
Yep.
a series I wouldn't mind looking at again. That was a
Yes.
7-game series. Their scores were like 121 to 80. They won that one the first game. Um, it's not like they only had 180, one scoring in the 80s, and that was game 6, which
Yep.
means that was a defensive powerhouse with that.
Yep.
But the Mother's Day Massacre game, when they pretty much detonated on them, um was the first game. But let's talk about the season in general. Like, when you look at that year, like with 63 wins, like, what, when you think about that and just the confidence that gave the team, they won the first round, gentlemen sweep 4-1, and
Yep.
then they lost the Eastern Conference Finals in 7 games. Give your thoughts on that year. And if anyone wants to come onto the stage, feel free to raise your hand. I would definitely bring you up. We're just going through the Celtics by year. Now we're on the 81-82 team that lost to the Philadelphia 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals. But go ahead, Justin.
Yes. That season, yes, they, was winning that season. They were still a complete team. Kevin McHale started 33 games.
Yep.
Young Danny Ainge was coming into the league and everything. Larry Bird was still doing his thing. You still had Brand Maxwell. See, the Eastern Conference at that time in the 80s, it was a really tough like Eastern Conference. And all that, you had your Celtics.
Yep. Yep.
Detroit was kind of rising a little bit, with
Hmm.
Isaiah being there. The Milwaukee Bucks, people don't really give the Milwaukee Bucks a lot of love and all that with Sidney Moncrief and Marcus Johnson and all them on that team. Um, Philadelphia was always a tough out for Boston and all that. Dr. J and Daryl Dawkins on that team,
Hmm.
Maurice Cheeks,
Hmm.
Bobby Jones, Andrew Toney, the Boston Strangler. It was, they always had an out because you're either going to see the Celtics or Philadelphia going into the
Yep.
finals and all that.
Yep.
It was going to come down to those two teams and everything.
Hmm.
And so, but yeah, it just like you could see like this team going to keep improving and everything, and they were really hungry for that. They were really hungry to go into that finals. Because the Lakers was going to go into that finals that year, and they ended up winning that year too as well. So it was a dogfight in that Eastern Conference Finals right there, that second year in a row.
Yep. And thank you for coming up, Three in the Key. Anything you want to talk about from the 81-82 season, or anything even before that? You
So
want to talk about? We're going by year, looking
yeah,
at
so 81, 82 was that Magic's second year? Was he injured that year? So we didn't get like the Lakers Celtics. Like Celtics got Houston in that finals, right?
Yeah, yeah, Celtics. Yeah, that was the year they played Houston, and we're on the year where they lost. This is his third year when he lost to the 76ers in the Eastern Conference Finals, and
Okay.
but they won 63 games that year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, no, I thought it was just, you know what, is because that Celtics era, how we saw it kind of like, you don't really hear much about how it evolved throughout the 80s like the
Yeah.
Lakers did, right?
Mhm.
Like,
Mm-hmm.
I know they started with Cedric Maxwell. He was actually the main guy as Bird was like establishing himself.
Yeah, he
And
was he
like,
was the man. People
Yes,
don't
he
realize.
was.
Yeah, and then like McHale was coming off the bench at that point, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. So and then, but like you don't hear like their coach. No, like they don't talk about the Celtics coach like they talk about Riley. I don't even know who the coach was.
Yeah, Bill Fitch.
Bill Fitch. Yep.
Oh, it was Bill Fitch. Okay. So
KC was on as assistant coach at the time.
Yep.
yeah, so it's no, I'm actually interested to learn a few things because yeah, the early because back then Bird was like he was kind of like a gazelle, right? Like we remember like old banged up Larry, but he was like flying all over the court
This
by
one he
this
was
time,
great.
right?
Yeah, this is
Yep.
one of the things that sticks out to me is this is when Larry Bird was great, but Cedric Maxwell is the one that won, like MVP of the finals, when they won the finals in '81.
Mm-hmm.
So they were a complete team,
Yeah,
like this year they were top 5 in offense. They were top 6 in defense, and they were number 1 in net rating. So it was, like Red Auerbach built a solid team from top to bottom.
Yep.
And again, so this is Red Auerbach pretty much was the even though he wasn't the owner, the way we saw him, the way I saw him, it's like he was the only one that worked in the front office at the Celtics because he was the
Yes.
only one that, like he was like Jerry Jones. Jerry Jones is the owner, of course, of the Cowboys, but for the Celtics, he had that kind of aura. And I remember
Yeah.
when Winning Time was on, and people was like, "Well, Red Auerbach wasn't the owner." I said, "You couldn't tell anybody else that." Like
No.
he was, the owners didn't have to make an appearance. Red Auerbach he had that aura, that mystique, that
Yep.
he was that guy. So
Yep.
people, in terms of the coach, somebody like Bill Fitch, no, like people don't talk about Bill Fitch like they talk about Riley, even though he had 360-win seasons in a row. Like they
Mm-hmm.
don't, he made it to the Eastern Conference Finals. Once Bird joined the team, they made it to the Eastern Conference Finals 3 straight years
Yep.
and won the finals one of those years.
Yep.
yeah.
But
And did
Earl,
they
thank
have
you for
a?
joining. Go ahead, 3, and then we'll go to Earl.
Oh, I was just wondering, was this the year? Did they have like Maravich at the end of his career at this point?
They did have Maravich at the end of his career. Let me look at.
It was Bud's rookie season because Melovich retired in 1980. It was Bud's
Okay,
rookie
yeah, yeah, yeah.
season, and
Sorry,
Melovich was coming off the bench.
okay.
Yeah, because I still remember that horse. There was that like horse video or something with like Bird and Maravich and Red Auerbach. It's
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
it's on YouTube. That's all I know about it.
Yeah, Ray used to put out some videos about like fundamentals, and he'll bring like a lot of NBA players that was really good in terms of their skill set, like in terms of shooting. They brought Larry Bird in, or if ball handling, he'll brought Pistol Pete in. They'll bring in post like moves. They'll bring McHale, Ralph Sampson, just any player that he can get his hands on. They used to do like these fundamental old school videos of just teaching like kids or whoever wants to play basketball about how to do this. So
And Robert Parrish was on the team too, right? And he wasn't like I only remember Robert Parrish as like old. I can't remember him, but from what I've heard, is like that dude was like a track star.
he was a hustler. He was a hustler.
He was, and he had these huge, like he had these broad shoulders. Like
Yes.
when I think about Kevin McHale, all I see is shoulders. Like that
Yep.
because
Yeah.
he was a
Yes.
big guy.
Yes.
Yeah, he was like a
He
coat
was
hanger.
huge, but he
Phil
had
Jackson. Yeah.
his shoulders were like it was like okay, he was a linebacker or something like
Mm-hmm.
like because his shoulders were so defined. He was 6'10",
Yes.
so he was a big dude, and he
Mm-hmm.
was like he wasn't one of those people that really wasn't his height. Like he was if he wasn't 6'10", he was damn close to it.
Yeah.
But let's get it, Earl. Earl, you want to share your thoughts?
Hmm.
Earl Austin?
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay, sorry then.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm just an old school basketball fan. Just came across your talk, really enjoying it. But what I remember, and I'm a Bullets fan growing up, but Eastern
Mhm.
Conference, I always followed that. But I remember
Mm-hmm.
those two series against Philadelphia in '81 and '82. Like you said, they both went 7 games.
Mm-hmm.
But both series, Boston was down 3-1 in both of
Yep.
those series. And I remember
Yep.
in that game seven, the most impressive thing, I remember the score was tied in the last minute, and Larry Bird got that rebound. And he dribbled down the left side of the court
Yep.
and pulled
Mm-hmm.
up from 15 off the glass. Now, that's
Yep.
almost an impossible shot, but he
Yep.
made it look so easy.
Yep.
And that was, I remember just freaking out when he did that. I said to my dad, I was like 15, like, did he just do that in the last minute of a conference
Mm-hmm.
championship
Mm-hmm.
game like it was in his backyard?
hmm
And then the following year, it was 3-1 again. And I'm like, oh, they're getting ready. And then Boston won in Philly in game six. And then everybody
Yep.
thought they're going to blow it. And then Tony went off that year. And then that's the first time I remember hearing the Beat LA cheer in Boston because they knew they were
Yes.
going to play. They were getting
Yes.
ready to play the
Mm-hmm.
Lakers. But yeah,
Yes.
the Boston Philly series stuff in the East was just amazing
It
basketball.
was
Like I say,
amazing back then. I don't think
Yep.
mm-hmm,
people realize like that was a real rivalry, Boston and
Yes.
Philly, in those years. And like some of the fights and
yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
J and Larry Bird got
and that
into it.
relationship was toxic. Like
hmm
yeah.
that's something that I wish there was like a documentary that looked at that. You know what I mean? Like they had
Yeah.
back to back 7 game, not I wouldn't mind watching those series over again.
Oh,
Oh, it
because
was
they were
awesome.
low
I mean,
scoring, and
that clip of Dr. J swinging on Bird, that's a preseason game, right?
Yep, I think
Yep.
so. Hmm.
That's wild.
Yep.
And think about that. So think about the energy in the Eastern Conference Finals. I mean, and when you think about it, that was that at that time those are the two top teams.
hmm
And just think about the luck of the Celtics getting Larry Bird, and getting Kevin McHale, and you have these 60 game seasons in a row. It's insane. They
hmm
went from 28 wins to going up to successive 60 win seasons. Like, yeah, that's like the Warriors getting lucky with drafting a top player, when they just happen to be down one year, and I don't think they drafted the right player, but like, and they continue to go on a run, and they just go on this run because with Larry Bird, and then Kevin McHale, that's what happened. They already had Cedric Maxwell. Now Cedric has some help and some
Yes.
young help,
Yes.
and
Yes.
like it was off to the races. You know what I mean? But um, after that, we go to the 83-84, and this was the year that the Celtics ended up playing the Lakers in a
Yes.
7 game series. So we're up to the
Yes.
83-84. And they also, so we up to that year. This is the year that the Celtics were another 60 game season. This is when and Casey Jones took over.
Post full season.
Um, Casey Jones took over, and the Celtics were number one. Um, um, they were number 6 in offense, number 3 in defense. They were number 1 in net rating. Just insane, just how great this team was from top to bottom.
Yes.
Before we talk about, the rounds of the playoffs, because they started off with your Bullets, and that was a 3-1 series that year. That's when the first round went to 5 games. Sometimes I think
hmm
we need to go back to that, um, but that would never happen because you have owners losing revenue in those other games that
Yep.
they could possibly get. But anything we want to talk about in terms of the season before we get to talking about their run in the playoffs that year?
So before that year though, the 82-83 was the 1 year Philly had Moses, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
And they swept Boston?
I
Like
think
that was faux?
yeah, I think Milwaukee
Four
beat
five four.
Boston. Milwaukee beat Boston, I believe, that year.
Oh, okay.
Milwaukee was really good.
Yes. A lot of people don't give that Milwaukee team a lot of
Yes,
credit and all that.
that was the
Uh,
one year they broke through, but then they could sometimes beat one, but they couldn't beat both of them. But
yeah.
like you mentioned, they had great teams. They had moved from the West to the East those during those early '80s years, and just really made it even tougher.
Oh yeah, that year they
Yes.
went to the semifinals. I skipped this year entirely, so sorry about that.
Man,
So is
I
that
went. I
Philly
was
team with
ready to go to the.
Moses like how like are they like greatest of all? Because I just look at the record on Basketball
It,
Reference,
it's one
and
of the
like
best
they
teams ever.
manhandled the Lakers, they
yeah,
manhandled everyone.
Yeah.
It was one of the best teams ever because
yeah,
they traded and they got they started Ivoroni, Doc, and then Moses came in and him and Doc, and it was Doc was close to the end, but Moses was.
yeah.
I don't think people realize he was one of the most dominant centers in history. And
Yes.
He
at that
was a
time,
killer.
he was a
He
monster,
was
and
Yes.
and he
killer.
gave Kareem the blues because he's one of the greatest offensive rebounders. He was a great
Yes.
scorer,
Yeah.
and and then Tony and Maurice Cheeks, and they just had
Bobby
a
Jones.
Bobby Jones coming off the bit. They just that was their year where they finally. It was like 6-7 years in the making, and they made that trade to bring Moses, and
Bring them to the
it,
promised land.
it got them
Yeah,
to the promised land.
we're gonna cover that era of the 76ers
Right.
soon because I just don't think people realize the like how good or people forget. Sometimes, you have fans who are fans of teams who don't really, they don't really care about the history. I'm not one of those. I love the history of all teams. Like I just love it. So we're gonna cover the history of we're gonna cover the era of the Sixers. I'm gonna do like a Dr. J series, his ABA history, and then do a room separately on his 76ers history because with 76ers, it wasn't just Dr. J. Like they had more of a team there. So it wasn't just him. So they should be separate rooms. So that is coming. That is coming. So yeah, in 82, 83, they did. I skipped over this one because they didn't go to the they stopped, they were dusted by the Milwaukee Bucks that year. And the Milwaukee Bucks, that team, when you look at the Milwaukee team that year, that's Marquise Johnson. I
And
don't
Jack Sigma too, or
Jack
Yeah, Jack
Sigma.
Sigma, Sidney
Yep.
Moncrief.
Moncrief.
Yeah.
so only
Yeah.
thing I
John
know
Nelson was the
about Jack
coach.
Sigma is he was an assistant coach in Toronto when Jonas Valanciunas' rookie year, and he taught Jonas that little Sigma fake they call it. And I think Jonas like that's basically his jumper, like that little over the head,
Yeah, the reverse
like
pivot
I
off the
don't see
reverse
Sigma
pivot.
on the roster though. I don't see Sigma on this roster.
It was probably still Bob Lanier then, maybe because
Bob
he was
Lanier. Yeah, Bob
yeah
Lanier
yeah
there.
he was there. Yeah, Sigma came like in like the mid '80s, I believe, when they had Cummings and Pressey on those pretty good teams as well.
yeah. But these
Mhm.
power forwards like Marquise Johnson and stuff that were giving you like 20 and 10 every night, there was
Marquis
a lot
Johnson
of
is
them.
underrated to me.
Very
Like I
Yeah.
underrated.
don't, yeah, like he doesn't get the respect he deserves either.
Yes. But that Bucks team, yeah, you have to give them a lot of credit. They were a really tough team. Don Nelson was the coach. They were kind of like the first like team to do like the small ball, like have like your guard post up and everything. They were a really great team. That which is very underrated and just couldn't get the job done because
Yeah,
Boston and
Philly.
Philadelphia was winning. So
Boston, Philly, exactly.
Yeah, Philly was so dominant. I mean, man, they were so dominant in those years. That was the last time they were that dominant, right? Like the '80s, because they didn't get that back. Um, they didn't get
Yeah,
that
until the
yeah,
Iverson era, I guess.
Yeah, they didn't.
yeah.
Iverson
Yeah,
era though,
I,
but the Iverson era,
Well, Barkley technically, but
Barkley, they had some good years,
yes.
but yeah, Iverson was a popular era, but they really didn't. They got to the playoffs, but they didn't get as far as like when you think about the 76ers from this time.
yeah,
Yep.
championship
Uh,
level Philadelphia was the late '70s, early '80s. That was championship
yes,
level Philly.
yes. Yes, that was the champion level era of Philly, which we will look into in the future. So now we're gonna go past that year and we're gonna talk
So
about
when did Dennis Johnson get to the Celtics?
The
This is
year the year
this
after
is where we're
Tony.
gonna go
this is
right
the
here.
year.
This is the year.
Oh,
This is the year.
This is the
okay.
year he gets there. Tiny's not there anymore. And
Yep.
yep, this is the year. Because I remember they overlapped. They didn't really overlap. Like when Tiny was gone, then you saw Dennis Johnson in the lineup. So this is the year they got Dennis Johnson. This is the year when you 83, 84, when we finally got that Celtics, that Lakers matchup.
Yep.
You always see the Celtics side of this, so it's interesting looking at this from the Celtics side. You always see the Lakers side in all these documentaries. The best one that's ever covered this was the Best of Enemies, because you
Yep.
got both sides, and unfortunately, you got a heavy dose of ML Carr, who I detest to this day. ML Carr is my least favorite Celtic, and which means he did his job. You know what
Yes.
I mean? Like, he did what he was supposed to do. But hey, George, thanks for being here. Thanks everyone for being here. If you want to join the stage and join the conversation, because now we're on the year that Magic faced Larry in the finals, George. We got to that year. So this year. Casey Jones was the coach. They won 62 games.
Yep.
Another 60-win season. Casey Jones was the coach, and I'm trying to see if that was the first year he was the coach. Yeah, that was the first year. 83, 84 was the first year.
Hmm.
Um,
And
so
this is the beginning of Bird's MVP run, the
yeah,
three-peat.
Yeah, that's the first one.
this is the first one. So let's talk about it. Let's get into it. Um, this is the year that first year that Casey Jones, like, again, was the coach. The first year we got Dennis Johnson um, on this roster. The starters were, of course, Bird, Parrish, Dennis Johnson. This is when Kevin McHale still wasn't the starter. Interesting. When you look at it, so when you think about the Celtics, even though Cedric Maxwell was the man, um, it's still I still think of Larry Bird and Kevin McHale as like a package deal.
Hmm.
So, but Cedric was, he was still starting, and yeah. So let's get into it about these Celtics.
Yes. So, like you said, Dennis Johnson just came in with the Celtics. He described it as a dream come true, playing underneath Red Auerbach and getting the tutelage under Red Auerbach. Before he came to the Celtics, Dennis Johnson was an all-star. He was with the Sonics, and was a Finals MVP. He was a scorer and all-around player for the Sonics teams with downtown Freddie Brown and Sigma and all them. He really changed his style and approach when he came to Boston and was more of a playmaker than a scorer. He'll still score what he needs to as well. He was also a defensive player. He made a defensive team that year, and Larry Bird won his first MVP that year. Definitely had a double double, 24 points a game, 10 rebounds a game. Larry Bird was a really good rebounder, and what happened? He had 6.6 assists a game too as well. So yeah, the Celtics, they were first in their Atlantic Division, and they went through the playoffs. Beat the Bullets, they beat the Knicks, they destroyed the Bucks 4-1,
Now
and then
let's go back to the Knicks, because with that series, when we look at that was a 7-game series.
yes,
I remember this one because
One of the great
um,
duels.
they
yes,
were those were that was a heck of a series. Bernard
yes.
King,
Oh
because we
God,
talked about Bernard King last month. Like, I'm not a Knicks fan, but Bernard King to me is when he was before injuries, and his when you look at his Knicks time, not the Nets time, because he was a little trouble with the Nets, and he was a little trouble when he had to go to rehab after that.
hmm
He was on another team. I forgot the team he was on before that. Then he got to the Knicks. Um, that man was a scoring. He was an assassin with the ball. So I wanted to just stop right here just for a minute, because the Knicks were a formidable opponent when you look at this was the Bernard King team, and it took them, and they took Boston 7 games.
yes,
So, that's what Bill Cartwright. They had Rory Sparrow, Ray Williams, Lewis Orr. When you hear these names now, it's like, who are they may not ring bells for a lot of people, but let's not forget that Bill Cartwright was also a member of those Bulls teams.
yep,
That. So this is when he was younger. But they took him 7 games. So
Yes.
sometimes when you are in the same conference, you have competitors that played you. Like I forgot how many times they played each other back then, but they get to know you. Like so
Yep.
they know how to play you, and they have Bernard King. So that series went 7 games, and it was a good series. So
And
Hmm.
Bernard King and Bird were checking each other, right?
yeah.
Wow, that must have been something.
one of the greatest playoff
Mhm.
duos in the
Mhm.
Yes.
history of the
Mhm.
NBA
Yeah.
was that Bernard Larry Bird. It was
Yes.
40s,
So
30s. It was unbelievable.
would
Yes.
you guys say it's up there with the Bird and Neek from like '87 or?
Yes, yes, yes.
It's very underrated, but it's definitely up there.
Bernard was that good. Bernard, in my opinion, is
Yes.
top
Yeah.
75. If
Bernard
not
was
for the
that
injuries,
good.
if not for
Bernard
the
was that
injuries, he's a
good.
top 75 guy.
Yeah. Before
Yeah,
injuries, he was real. He deserved his Hall of Fame
yeah,
induction.
Yes,
He
he does.
was he was that good, and I'm glad he got it. But of
Yes.
course, once they got past the Knicks, because that was their hardest series in the Eastern Conference.
yes.
They met up with the Bucks, and the Bucks. That was a 4-1 series, but
Yeah.
that's when they faced their old teammate Tiny Archibald. Like Junior Bridgman and Charlie Chris and yeah, Marquise Johnson. Yeah, they got past him pretty quickly though.
Hmm.
And then we get to the Lakers series. 7 game. This one went 7 games. And yeah, we know who was on the team for the Lakers. We all know the Lakers side of the story. So let's talk about Larry Bird getting this ring that he wanted desperately versus the Celtics, versus the Lakers.
And
Talk
is
about it.
this also like the first the year it's live? It's not tape delay.
That's a good question. Was this the first year? Let me look that up real quick.
I
Y'all can
believe
keep.
they were all live. I
I
believe
think
so.
they were all live because David Stern came in '84. '84 was like the year that the NBA kind of like emerged, like in terms of taking off, because you had like a lot of people that you could market, like a
Oh,
doc, like a
82 was
doc.
the first year. So
Yeah,
82 was the first year. So they were live at this time. Yeah.
live
Yeah,
at
I
the
remember
time. Yeah,
watching
okay,
Yeah.
them live actually.
because it was tape delay in '81. I remember. So
Yeah.
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 Because when you watch the documentaries that talk about it now, like when the game was ours and stuff, they mentioned this finals is like this is what everyone was waiting for to like blow
Yes.
the
Yep.
league up.
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, because it was the first time they'd met since the '79 NCAA final,
Yes.
which blew up college basketball forever.
Yes.
And it took 5 years for them to hook up for an NBA
Yes.
championship, and they had the same effect. That Magic Bird had the same effect as it did that game in Salt Lake City 5 years previous.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. This series really pushed. To me, this is a series that pushed the NBA forward.
Yep.
And this was the matchup you had, and they said this in Best of Enemies. You had the Lakers, like Hollywood
Mm-hmm.
versus the blue collar,
Yep.
hardworking, reputation of the Celtics, where you had the Boston Garden, which nobody wanted to play in because Red did all kinds of things to to,
He
to
turned the
bring
air
the
conditioning off.
home court advantage. And think about that today with these 4 players we have today. Can you imagine?
I
Some
heard there was
Red
also dead spots on the court
crazy.
where like
Like,
the ball would
Yes,
just
there
be like
were.
flat.
Yep.
yep,
Red was.
Red was man. But when you look at the series and they talk about dreading going to the Boston Garden, and Red detested going into see the Lakers, play the Lakers. But with this series, it was tense. It's
Yep.
black versus white too,
Yep.
because you got to remember the time. Like and the way and think about how the game was marketed. Because the funny thing is back then, some of my male family members, they of course they went for the Lakers, but I say of course because it was very divided on what team you rooted for at that time.
Yep.
We had friends in Boston who were quietly going for the Lakers only because of yeah the reputation of Boston and Red Auerbach, which is interesting. So it's when you look at that and take all of that into account, um, Magic talked about the extra pressure that was on them in the best of enemies.
Yep.
Like you had, he said he was approached by black people in Boston, that they were rooting for them, and he couldn't understand it because he's like, this is this is their area. Like he just couldn't identify, but he didn't understand like the culture in Boston at the time.
Yep.
So setting that stage, Pat Riley being the head coach, Hollywood, and then you have um, like Casey Jones, like and so this series that changed the NBA forever
Yep.
after. Um, let's get into it and talk about it. Game one of this series. Let me get down there. I'm trying to find the playoffs. I'm in this.
Also, one thing to add before you start,
Mhm.
Okay.
LA thought that this was their real chance to beat Boston
Yes.
since because they had broke the 60s. Boston won every time, but in 69
Yes.
LA really blew it in 69
Yes.
with Russell and when Chamberlain, West, and Baylor got together. So this was been 15 years. They thought this was their shot. They really thought they were going to get Boston this year. So you add that backdrop, this is finally their opportunity to break that Boston X
Yep.
in the finals.
Yep.
Was this series.
Yep.
Yes,
Yep.
because of the like Jerry West and
Elgin Baylor.
who
Elgin Baylor
wasn't
and
didn't want to even step foot in Boston Garden.
No.
You know what I mean? And
Nightmares.
like because they of the curse, and
Yes.
this was
Yeah,
supposed
the
to
leprechaun.
be
The
this was supposed to
Leprechaun.
be the
Yep.
year. This was supposed to be the year. And this one, 83, 84 was the year versus Los Angeles Lakers. Yeah, this is the year the Lakers won this. Okay. I feel like this is the series that got the monkey off their back. So
No, 85 was the year that they got the
No.
monkey off their back.
85 was
85.
85 the
84,
next year.
The
this
following
one,
year was yeah.
84 was
yeah,
Boston.
this one actually was.
84 was
84 was
tragic,
Boston.
right?
That's what the 80. I'm looking at it on
Yeah, Boston won all the
83,
odd
84
games.
is
Lakers
no
won all the even
83,
games.
84. Yeah, this is Boston. I keep forgetting. I'm looking at this from the Boston perspective, not the Lakers. Like hello. So yeah, this was Boston.
Is
So
this the clothesline year? Or
Yes,
Yes.
this is a
It,
yeah,
clothesline
Yeah.
it's
series.
what
this is the
changed.
clothesline
It was the
series.
game changing play. Bird called him out.
Yes.
Bird called him out after game two when they blew him out, and then Bird called out his team for playing soft,
Yep.
and Mikhail took the lead and clothesline Rambis in that
Yes.
game four, and
Game
that's what
4.
it
Yep.
changed. It changed the
Yeah,
tenor. It
yeah,
changed the tenor
yeah.
and the
And then
physicality of the
Because game
series.
three was a bloodbath. I
it was
Yeah,
a blood.
mean,
it
Game
yeah,
changed. It,
two.
game
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 two.
two was
James
an
Worthy
overtime
had a
game.
bad pass that game and gave it to and Joey Henderson stole the pass from James Worthy. James Worthy
Mm-hmm.
said on the podcast he still got nightmares about it.
of course,
Mm,
yes.
mm, 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 mm. They remember every detail. You know what I mean? Like when you look at these
Mm-hmm.
players talk about these series, it's like they warp back into time and they go back there.
Yep.
But yeah, when you look at it, that they like they had an overtime game, in game two. Game three was the blowout,
Yep.
and so game four sets the stage for what like one of the dirtiest plays, ironically, in my opinion. Like Kurt Rambis was, woo. Kurt
Ramus was just on a
Rambis.
pod. It was a feisty game because not only with the clothesline with McHale on Rambus, Larry Bird and Kareem got into it too as well in the third quarter, and then freaking Larry Bird pushed Michael Cooper to the baseline and everything during the imply play. This was a feisty game right here.
Oh,
Yeah,
was
Boston.
that the one where Bird is inbounding it and he like hip
He
checks
pushed
him?
him.
Yes, yeah. Bird
Yeah.
Bird set the table after that blowout game. It was going to really be Showtime.
Yeah.
Lakers 4-1, and then Larry Bird drew a line in the sand. In the papers, he called out. He said, "This our team is soft. We can't be doing this." And and then it became grimy, and it just he changed everything. It was amazing how that and Boston became like. And people think the bad boys started all the physical play. The Eastern playoffs have been just physical, beat down, bloodbath basketball for ages, and that just kind of exemplified that. And Boston really brought it to that series. And like you said, it changed that whole series and
It
really
changed
threw
the
LA
whole
off the strides.
series. It
Yes,
grew because Lakers were perceived, and they were finesse. You know what I
Yep.
mean?
Yes.
And they had and they didn't have that grit that they needed because Boston brought the red owl back out of them.
Yes.
That win changed the whole dynamic. The next game they ended up winning the next game in Boston. And then the Lakers, got a win.
Mm-hmm.
And then they got the ultimate win on their floor.
Game 7.
Game 7. I love game 7s. The tenseness of game 7s. They won again, and the Lakers were devastated. Magic blamed himself.
Tragic Johnson.
Well, that's
Magic
really wild.
Johnson.
I saw that. Like, I saw that last minute where he actually he's trying to feed the ball into Kareem, and he can't. Like, I've never seen Magic just deer in the headlights like that.
Yeah, he
All
froze
the
up.
highlights you see, it's dominance.
He froze up, and he's
And
admitted
Magic
it.
and Magic, like you said, he was so devastated because. And remember,
He was.
this is Magic with 2 championships under his belt last year.
Yeah.
But the fact that who he lost to, it was the Celtics and it was Larry.
Yes.
It's really that's what
on the bright side, Larry was happy because he got
But
his
Larry
game
was
back.
happy.
So
Larry was happy. Larry got his get back, and
he knew that he knew how Magic was feeling.
Yes.
And
I heard him say he's like, I'm glad it hurt him.
yeah,
He's like savage about it, bro.
They weren't friends then. Remember,
Oh, not at
because
all.
Larry Bird will rebuff any attempts that Magic would make to try to Magic was the one that was friendly and smiling at the time, his public persona, because the real Magic I'm sure wasn't what we thought.
Yeah, they didn't become friends until they did that sneaker commercial together, that Converse sneaker commercial.
Yep. So then, after that loss, we go to the 84-85.
Yep.
And let's go to that year. Another 60-win season. Man, the Boston Celtics ruled this all these years. 79, from 80 through 86, they had 60-win seasons. That's insane.
Yep.
And at this point, the East is getting good, strong now, right? Ewing's in the league, Dominique with Atlanta, Detroit.
But Detroit was coming. But the Bulls were nowhere close. They were bad for a number of years.
The Bulls were terrible. That thing.
They weren't building right around George at all.
Yes.
So that was a ways away, but Detroit was coming. Yeah.
In Philadelphia, they added Barkley to the roster too as well. So he was
they
coming
got
off
to the Eastern Conference Finals. In that year, 84-85, they got to the Eastern Conference Finals that year. And they faced the Lakers again, and this is the year they lost in the finals. So before we get there, these were the years also when the Cavaliers was also a good team. At that time. So the 84-85 Cavaliers. Mark Price wasn't on the team at that time, or he was injured or something. I'm not seeing his name.
He was at Georgia Tech.
Drafted in '86. He was drafted in '86.
Yeah, he
Yeah,
was still at
'cause
Georgia
I'm a
Tech.
Mark
Yeah.
Price. I'm a Mark Price fan. I'm a Mark Price fan. I feel like he doesn't. He's another player that had some good years, but he got injuries kind of wrecked his career.
Yep.
But the Cavaliers were a formidable team at the time, and they faced them, in the playoffs, the first round, and basically it was a gentleman's sweep, 3-1. Then they faced Detroit, uh,
Mm-hmm.
the Bad Boys, and we all know the history of the Pistons.
But they weren't
Isaiah
bad
Thomas-
boys yet, right? These were more like the run and gun Pistons
It
with like
was
Kelly
like Kelly
Trapica.
the run and gun.
Trabuca,
They had Isaiah Thomas. They had Bill Laimbeer,
Yeah.
Kelly
Steve
Trabuca,
Kelly
Johnson.
Trapuka. Yeah.
Adrian Dantley. I think that was before Adrian Dantley, but yeah, he it was before like they got
It
like
was before they. It was before they got some of the bruisers.
Dumas and all them. Yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely
That was
before
the year
Dantley.
Isaiah was like 14 assists for the whole season. Like
like
it
you
was
be
pretty
watching him every
wild.
night.
Yeah,
Yep,
his per game was 14 assists. Wow.
yep.
Yep. Yep. His points, 21 points a game, 14 points, and his 14 assists. That's crazy. That was a great. We gotta cover the Pistons at some point too.
Well,
Um,
Isaiah's rookie year, you talked about Bernard King and Bird. In that playoff series before that, the Knicks played the Pistons, and they had a big showdown. And in one game, they were trailing, and this is Isaiah, I think his rookie year. He scored 16 points in the last 90
94
seconds.
seconds.
So it was at
Yep,
96. You remember?
mm,
You see, I know you remember that. Yep.
94 seconds. Yep.
94 seconds exactly to put the game into overtime. I think Hubie Brown was coaching New York at the time,
Yes, he
I
was.
believe.
and
So, and it
it's
was just
unfortunate with Isaiah Thomas because I think his legend and his history is being corroded with his constant, showing how angry and pissed he is. How Jordan called him an asshole, and he was really referring to his time, like those battles with the Pistons, because people, and it wasn't just Jordan. Players perceived that Isaiah Thomas was the lead of, like of the Bad Boys, and he was the
Yeah.
one, like corralling and influencing that style of play. So, like Isaiah wasn't like about some of a number of the top players in the league. I think Isaiah took it as he was calling him an asshole personally instead of. I think the way they edited that didn't make it look. So Isaiah, to this day, he does interviews, and this is still brought up. And while Jordan's on his golf course that he owns, like living life, but people don't realize just how good of a point guard
He
he was.
was.
Like Jordan even said, and even though he was an asshole, and he meant at that time,
Mhm.
he's still the second greatest point guard to ever play the game.
Yep.
That's the part that he doesn't talk about. He doesn't talk about how he gave him that respect. He just
and
tries to
and
like
also
disrespect him at every turn.
Isaiah, like, and you guys who were actually like watched the game, right? I was like a kid, like baby at that point. They were saying, like, Isaiah always says, he's like, we adopted our style from the Celtics. We learned from the
Yep,
Celtics.
he
Yeah,
Yes,
they
did.
were the
He
yeah.
did say
teachers.
that.
Yep, they were
Yep,
teachers. Mm-hmm.
because the Celtics did when like when we're going to get there. Let's before we get to the transition from the at the end of the '80s between the Celtics and the Pistons. We're going to get there, but yeah, they beat the Pistons. This is when the Pistons started appearing in the playoffs, and they beat the Pistons, 4-2. Then they went to the 76ers. That was
Yep.
the year to Charles Barkley, and that was a gentleman's sweep. And then we get to the Lakers,
Whew.
and they lost, and they lost that one, as we know, in Boston and in the Boston Garden, and that couldn't have been sweeter justice for the
Yep.
Lakers at the time.
Yep.
Anything y'all want to say about that
Uh,
final run?
that first game was the Memorial Day Massacre where Boston destroyed the Lakers,
Yes.
like
Oh
really
God.
destroyed the Lakers, and everybody was criticizing Kareem because that was not his best game and everything. So everybody was doubting Kareem. They was like, "Oh, he's old. He's not the same as he was and stuff like that." Pat Welly did a move in terms of like the team bus. They don't bring a lot of people on the team bus. It's just
Oh
the players.
yes,
He brought
that's what his
Kareem's
father.
parents to
Yes,
the bus
Yep.
talked to him and everything, and he just changed the whole series, and he was just unstoppable. He gave the Celtics hell that series and won the
Yes, he
Finals
did.
MVP too
Yep.
as well. So
Mm-hmm.
The
At
Kareem,
38, right? He's
yes,
38 at this point.
yes,
the 17-foot hook shot from the baseline, which sealed the deal.
yep,
That Kareem hit. He hit the same shot from the same spot in
yep,
'74 in Game 6, which forced the Game 7 in the
yep,
Boston Garden over Cowens. He hit that same shot, which
yep.
in '85, 10 years later, which sealed that series from about 50, a mid-range jumper for most of us. It's a skyhook.
Yes.
Yes,
And that
unreal.
sky hook is such a weird shot. Like it actually has to be so precise, or else it's a terrible miss. Like it's like a brick off the backboard.
That's why
And
nobody
he
else has ever
was,
done it. That's why you never see nobody else
yeah,
ever
man.
done it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, because I do that stuff in like pickup games, and like dudes laugh at me, right? Because I'm just like a short, like 5'11" dude, like can't jump, but I just do it because I like it, and I'll get it like once in every 10 tries, but
Yeah,
He could do
he
it
was
off the dribble. He
clutch.
could do it off the dribble. He could do it from the elbow. He could do it from the baseline, from the block. It's amazing in the middle of the lane, left-handed.
Yeah,
yeah, it's really like a guy that big, man. Like that's like ballet level, like coordination from a guy who's 7'2".
yeah, it was really precise,
Yes,
and it was like I think that's why a lot of guys don't do it. Is it's he like practiced that like guys would practice like their outside shot. Like that was his move, and so like you
hmm
know he had this perfect grace, and like he would just do this little arm bar to kind of keep you at a distance, and
Yep.
it was just like you couldn't get to it. There was nobody tall enough in the league that could even like trouble him, get in his face or anything. It was like and it was also his demeanor, I think, what allowed that. Like he had this very calm, like just kind of like get me in my spot, and I'm gonna get you, I'm gonna cook you, and it was yeah, it was unreal.
you could
Yeah.
almost thank you can almost thank the NCAA before that too, because when in the '60s when at UCLA, they outlawed dunking, and they did
Yep.
that to
Yeah,
try to keep him and somebody
Yep.
with Elvin Hayes
yep,
from dunking, and that's when him and
David
Wooden started,
Thompson. Yep.
develop. That's when he started to develop that shot because he couldn't dunk,
exactly.
and now
Exactly.
look what they created.
The devastating move.
They're trying to
And
stop a
And
man
this
that
was
couldn't
the
be
last
stopped.
series he had like a bit of hair on his head. Because I was
Yes,
just a kid. I remember this, and
yeah,
then he was
yeah,
bald.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
the thing
Yeah.
is when you look at the salaries, like Kareem was the highest paid player at 1.5 million,
Mm-hmm.
1.530. Mitch Kupchak made 1.1. Magic was at a million. You had Jamal Wilkes at 860,000. James Worthy at 400,000. Byron Scott at 350,000. Michael Cooper at 325,000. Kurt Randall
Wow.
200,000. So when you look at the salaries, like of today, and then you go to the Celtics, you had Larry Bird, the highest paid out of both these two teams at 1.8 million.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Kevin McHale at a million. Cedric Maxwell at 830. So this is Matt Cedric was fighting for a better contract at one point.
Yep.
You had Larry at 1.8, and he was at 830,000.
Mm-hmm.
Paris
How
700.
is Kupchak the second highest on that team? Who's his agent?
Right.
Damn.
Right. But yep, he was the second highest paid on that team. But
And he hardly
Larry
played.
was, he was in the money at 1.8. I mean, he was technically the highest paid on paper between the two teams. Um, he may have been the highest paid in the league. I'm gonna look that up, but 1.8, because remember, this is why one of the reasons why Larry, Magic, wanted more money from the Lakers. because of the Larry Bird. He wanted to make more than Larry Bird.
But Magic had signed that wild deal, right? That with Jerry Buss, 25
25
years for
years.
25
years.
million.
Yep.
And
Yep.
and at the time they didn't understand. It just
No.
guaranteed, like Magic's salary at $1 million a year. That's what he was doing.
Mm-hmm.
I remember
Yeah, that
TV
was
Larry
TV
Bird
wasn't like it was.
Larry Bird was making 1.8.
Yep.
He knew, like Jerry Buss knew what he was doing because it wasn't,
Yes.
and the contracts back then weren't guaranteed like that.
No.
So that contract was an owner's friendly deal that he got over
Big
on Magic
time.
for.
Big time. Yep.
So yeah, like we see through it now, but back then they were and the funny thing is they were asking Magic, including Kareem, was he part of management now?
Yes.
Not realizing that the deal was really owner friendly.
Yeah, and
But anyway,
it was because
um,
Magic used to hang out with Jerry all the time, and so like I
Yep.
think Magic
so
kind
he
of
trusted him. He
exactly
trusted him.
he trusted him. He kind of felt like Jerry was his friend, and like Jerry was your friend up to the extent of protecting his money, obviously, and that
Yep.
He was a people. He knew how to manage personalities,
absolutely, yeah,
and he was definitely better than their previous owner, and he knew that Magic was his moneymaker, and he kept him happy.
yeah, he was a charmer.
And
Exactly.
and that's basically the bottom line. And if you watch the Lakers series, and we'll go back to Boston. Give me just a second. We got to get to 85, 86, but this is when like when you think about it, Magic did definitely have that relationship, but when you look at like the Lakers series that they produced on Hulu, it was his son who was like his oldest son. I think he was kind of jealous of the relationship that Magic and Dr. Jerry Buss had, but he was like, I don't know about him being the son, being treated like a son. But they had an owner player type relationship. I think he was trying to say he managed the relationship, like he managed it accordingly, and he was that person that Magic felt he needed. They did have a close relationship now, but like he managed it accordingly for his interests. But let's get back to Lakers. Let's go to they lost the finals, and then let's go to 85, 86. This is when 67 wins, another 60-win season. They were top 3 in offense, number 1 in defense, and number 1 in net rating for the season. Casey Jones was still the coach. And this is
And
the season. Yeah, this is the season. We know the great. We have Bill Walton on this team, Larry Bird. We know that, but this is when you have Bill Walton. So
Yep.
yeah,
let's.
a big kind of how should we put this kind of interesting acquisition that Red made in the off season. And
Yep.
yeah,
Yep.
like it was kind of a little bit of the fudging of the NBA rules at the time, a little bit, as I remember.
Yeah.
And yeah, like, you know, everybody thought Bill's career was over before this, because of his injuries.
Yep.
And
Yep.
he basically, told Red, I think I can do one more year. And Red was like, okay. And they bent the rules, and that team was ridiculous. Like,
Yes.
I mean, that team is still in
I
my
mean,
nightmares. I kid you not. Like, as a Laker fan, like,
They were loaded. They were
yes,
loaded.
loaded.
You could just go.
loaded, but also kind of like the way the ball moved. I remember lots
That's
of
it.
like short
That's it.
passes.
absolutely. Yeah, that's what I was going to say. That
Everybody
the
touched the
passing
ball.
was incredible.
Yes. Mikhail, that was his first year starting, like the whole season too. That was his first year starting.
Yeah,
Dennis
because
Johnson doing
Cornbread was
his.
traded. Cornbread
Mm-hmm.
traded.
That team was just they were just unloading on like everybody, and then I think they only lost I think one game at home that season. That's how scary that team was. They only lost one game at home. They were legit scary. And then I know they had like a bad loss on Christmas, and they had to really dig themselves deep and really get motivated and stuff. And Bill Walton said to like the team, "We're not going to drink again until we win the championship." And
Because they were drinking
at
halftime at that point. Right?
Yeah. So they was like, "We're not drinking again until we win." And they just went on this run that you like the passing, and Larry Bird won his third straight MVP. Bill Walton won his sixth man of the year. They were just one of the top 5 teams of all time.
Bill is probably, until Jokic came along, the best passing big man we've ever seen. As far as amazing. I mean, that's UCLA, Portland, even Boston. He just fit like a glove. Never seen a big man just pass the basketball that pinpoint, and just he knew you were open before you knew you were open, and to fit him into what they already did as a team was just unbelievable to see.
Yeah, Walton, because of the injuries, really underrated, right? Like one of the few, like basically changed the league right when he got in, and then just
Yes.
the injuries kept him out, and then 10 years later he has this like resurgence.
Yes. Yeah. He's
Exactly.
probably one of the top 5, if healthy. I think he probably would be one of the top 5 centers ever. He was that good on both ends of the floor. He was that good. I know Bob Ryan, you could talk, and then Boston talks about him all the time. But yeah, he was that unbelievable as a center, passing, defense, could score, block shots. Almost single-handedly beat Philly in '77. That was
And the other crazy thing about this time in his career is that like he was like a statue out there. He wasn't very mobile,
Mm-hmm.
like you watch him and you'd think like how is he being effective? And it's just he was just a big body that would take up the space in the right places and make those perfect little passes. And like he'll get you the rebounds and get you a lot of putbacks. But like he was big and lumbering at that point, and like just it was crazy.
I believe Scotty Wedman was added to that team, if I'm not mistaken, and he was a consistent scorer throughout his career.
He was on the team that year.
And he added another jump shooter to that team, another veteran jump shooter. He had a nice career at the Kings around.
And Ainge was a sniper at this point, right? Like he was.
Oh,
Yes.
Yeah.
He was still a pest. People don't really people underestimate Danny Ainge. Like he was an All-American in all 3 sports in high school. Like he was an All-American in all 3 sports: baseball, basketball, football. He was an athlete.
Well, I'm from Toronto. He was drafted by the Jays.
Oh wow,
the Blue Jays.
I lived in Syracuse at that time when he was drafted. The AAA team was the Syracuse Chiefs, and he was our shortstop at a 6'5" shortstop with the Syracuse Chiefs before he got called up to Toronto. We used to catch him out at MacArthur Park all the time. We were like, wow, this is the guy that was at Brigham Young going coast to coast to beat Notre Dame in the NCAA tournament. Here he is playing pro baseball. Yeah, he was an amazing athlete.
Yeah, he's the one Celtic. Malika was talking about ML Carr. Like he's the guy that like I will always despise Danny. I will always, because it was also not just as a Laker, but like he went to BYU, and I'm also a UNM Lobo fan because I grew up here in Albuquerque,
Yes.
and so like that rivalry was big back then. And like I hated Danny in college. I hated Danny in the pros. Like, and I still hate Danny.
And there's so many highlights of him as a pro, just like little dirty, like like I remember one against Mario Ali. He's inbounding the ball, whips it at his face.
Yep. That's to interject. That's the reason why him and Robert Horry didn't get along when Robert Horry became a player for Danny Ainge. He said he could never respect anything Danny Ainge said because of what he did to Mario Ellie. And that's why he ultimately threw the towel in his face and ended up getting traded.
Yep.
And he's probably like the closest thing, like in terms of learning like GM tricks from Red. Like they always say Danny would trade his own mother to win. Like I remember.
Yeah, I mean he just fleeced us again this year. took Stanley Johnson and gave us Patrick Beverley. Like, I hate that, man.
I mean, Danny Ainge. I mean, even on the golf course,
Yep.
Steph Curry and Michael Jordan talked about that's their favorite person that they like to play, both of them, because of the amount of trash he talks. So, that's this Ainge. Like anywhere you take him. Hey, Um, Valid
Yes.
Hazen. Thanks for
Yes.
joining the stage. Anything you want to jump in and get in on here for the 85-86 Celtics?
Well, one of the things I remember someone pointed out that they had a bad loss on Christmas, and it was a bad loss. And so I had a conversation with Peter Vesey. I had a podcast with him, and he told me some stuff like off the podcast, and he told me that was one of the times where Casey Jones actually flipped out at the fact that they lost to the New York Knicks because they lost in double OT to a team that only won 20 games. And they were like, he was like, how the hell are you supposed to be a championship team when you lose to a 20-win team? You can't lose to the Knicks. And he had said that it was during, Peter Vesey had said it was during his trip that he had traveled with the Celtics. And he said, look at this. He comes with us for a couple of trips and we already start playing like the Knicks. So when they lost, he was like giving Peter Vesey crap, but those are one of the things. But that Celtics team was just amazing. I go back and watch games, and I used to use some of the plays that they did and some of the things that they ran for my high school team at Milton Academy because the way that they moved the ball was just timeless, and it's just beautiful basketball. And for anybody to say that they don't like that era, they must not appreciate good basketball.
So is Bird's back issue starting at this point from because he paved his mom's driveway, or
Yeah, well,
That was actually
Yes,
before, right?
happened in the off season
started.
before this season started.
Yeah, yeah, and like it started, but it didn't really get bad. But his continuing of doing work and not paying people to do his work because
Yep.
he didn't believe in doing that.
Yep.
So his continuing to do that made his back even worse, and it got to the extent where 89 is where he started just lying on the
Mm-hmm.
floor and
Mm-hmm.
not sitting on the. And you got to think about it in the 80s and going dating back all the way to the 60s, the seats and chairs that they sat in were not comfortable. So that does a lot of strain to your back. Imagine it's like going to a cookout with like folded chairs that don't have any cushion. And that's what they had to sit on and then play, sit on, get up, play again. And it just did wonders, like in a bad way to his back. And that's why he ultimately retired.
Yeah. That's one of the Larry Bird's back is one of those things that it's just like one of those things that happened that shortened his career um way before its time. But 85-86, he was still formidable on the court. um that team, one of the greatest teams of all time. um they won they won 67 games that season. And the like, and I guess when you think about it, look, think about teams today. I feel like teams today, like if we think about that game and that happened today, we will say this is a championship level team playing down to their competition.
Yeah. Yep.
Yep.
That's what we would say. So to me, this is an example of that. That this is an example that always took place.
Mm-hmm. Now, don't get me wrong. Like the Knicks weren't, even though they were a 20-win team, the Knicks were still like legitimate. Like they had some solid pieces to their team. It was just the league was so competitive at this time that they just weren't good enough to match with them. I mean, they still had a young Patrick Ewing. They still
Mhm.
had a solid Hall of Famer, and
Still
I think
had. I mean, Ewing just came in, really, 85.
Yep.
yeah, yep,
Yep.
yep. So he was still young, but I will say one thing: that that season that they won, and I didn't even think they would get 2 losses, but no one really gives props, even though they only won 1 game. No one gives props to that oh my goodness, that Atlanta Hawks team that actually gave them
Whew.
their loss. That Atlanta Hawks team was tough, right? They weren't going to beat them, but um, they were tough. They were tough. Randy Whitman, no one.
Valid, we don't hear you.
Yeah.
Did you get a call?
Yeah,
He
we
could
lost him,
play.
it looks like. Oh, here he comes.
Oh, you're back because we lost you for a few
Hello.
minutes, for a few
Oh,
seconds
okay.
there.
No, I was gonna say people don't give a lot of credit to that Hawks team, but that Hawks team was decent, and Randy Whitman could play. He could shoot. That man could shoot. And I even was thinking the same thing. I'm like, I'm looking at this team and I'm like, oh, Randy Whitman, he probably wasn't doing that. He was getting buckets. He was getting buckets. He really scored a little bit, and that's the only team before the
Yeah,
Houston
he was getting.
Rockets.
Yeah, he was like
Mm-hmm.
13 points a
Mm-hmm.
game at
Yep.
that point. He was getting some solid baskets, like 4 assists a
Yeah.
game. He was definitely making an impact.
Yep.
And they had Doc at this point. Doc
Doc
was
Rivers, Kevin Willis. They had, Dominique was the man. They had John Battle. They had
Yeah,
Mike Fratello. Um, they had a Spud Webb. They had a loaded roster.
yeah, they did. They were formidable.
I mean,
They were definitely.
that the crazy thing is like that they were formidable enough that Milwaukee didn't even get a game on them that year.
Nope.
And Atlanta got a game on them. And Milwaukee I thought had way more talent, but Atlanta is they went hard, and I think it was a kind of an awkward matchup for them because with Milwaukee they played up against Milwaukee multiple times. They understood how they played. But Atlanta was a younger team, a faster team, and a different version. So like it was a more difficult, not that difficult because they still only won 1 game. But I don't. That Celtics team, in my opinion, it's between the 3 best teams are the '87 Lakers, the '86 Celtics, and I have the '96 Bulls in there. And then I will say the six.
Where do you put that Warriors
I
team
put,
that didn't win the
I
finals?
put the Warriors team after the 65, 66 Celtics, I believe. I think it's that year. I put them after
Hmm.
them. A lot of people are gonna
If they won the finals, would they be higher on your list if they won the finals that
who
year? The Warriors,
and when? What year?
when they won 70. What is it? When they won 73?
73 and
No,
9
because
Yeah,
I think the 2017 Warriors were way better, even though their record wasn't
with
as good.
Durant. Yeah.
Durant was ridiculous. Like, and I think if we're playing the era game, right? I think if we were to play in this era, then the 65, 66 Celtics would have a very tough time winning. But if they were to play with a little bit more physicality, I think the way that they ran, that people don't understand this, the pace of the 60s and the 70s was actually faster than it is today.
yeah,
And
it
it's
was.
because they
Yeah,
got up so many shots and all they did was run. I see Paris laughing, but I do my research. I know this stuff. Like I've watched games from 90,
yeah. You're an historian. You're definitely an
I've watched
historian.
games from 1960 all the way to 2022. Any game that I could get my
it
hands
was a
on.
lot more of a track meet back then,
Yeah, it
right?
was a lot more of a track meet, but that's how they played. That's the way the game was played. In the
That was the era.
60s,
That was the style at that
you can
time.
look it
That's one thing. Yeah, it was the style at that time.
I mean, you can look it up. They tried to get close to 100 shots a game, each team, and that's not what. It's more intricate plays right now, more designed plays and development to get shooters their shot. But back then, it was like more of a quicker pace.
Yeah. Which makes me think, obviously, like the athletes now are more explosive and stronger and jump higher, but I think endurance, cardio
I don't
wise,
think that I don't think it's I don't think it's the same endurance cardio wise.
Yeah. Yeah, like if those guys are basically sprinting, and a lot of those dudes, like Wilt's playing 48 minutes a game back then, right? Like he's not sitting, and they're sprinting pretty much the whole time.
Will always be a player that I'm just curious about because he was an amazing and off the charts athlete, but Bill Russell was able to win so much. That team was able to win so much. And granted, Bill had better teams, and we got to get back to the Celtics in the '80s. But um, Bill has such better teams, but it was that matchup that Bill was able to win so many times that it always stumps me when people rank Wilt, they hold that against him every time. Yeah, you have all these records. Yeah, you were a great athlete, but you didn't win enough.
Yeah,
Well,
it's completely
that's a
unfair
big
because
thing.
Wilt was carrying his teams, and Bill had a stacked team, and so Bill wasn't asked to do as much. So all Bill really had to do was concentrate on playing Wilt defensively. He didn't have to do as much on the offensive end as Wilt had to do. Wilt really had to carry those teams, and he does not get the credit just because
And
he
he's
didn't
punished
he
for
didn't
it
get
now.
the ultimate. Yeah, he didn't get the ultimate prize, and he gets punished for it. Absolutely.
Yeah, Paris, anything you want to add here before we go back to talking about I think we're going to move on. We're going to finish this 85, 86, and then breeze through the rest of this time. But go ahead, Paris.
No, I'm honestly just enjoying this conversation. Yeah, it's a really good conversation. I'm just enjoying the history of it.
So
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, so they don't get the Lakers in this year. They get Houston. They get Twin Towers.
They
They
had the
get the Twin
upset.
Yep.
Towers. Yep, they get the Twin
Yeah.
Towers in this year. They
Because
They
got
had that upset.
Houston
Sam
And Andrew
Houston got
Wiggins'
a
dad apparently is on
Houston
that roster.
yeah, and Houston beat the Lakers in an amazing game 7 where Ralph
Really?
Sampson
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
hit the last shot.
that
Oh,
last shot.
Mitchell Wiggins. He was a shooting guard at that
Play for the
time. Wow.
The
Okay.
a big thing about that '86 Rockets team, they were missing. They didn't have a point guard.
No.
And it's because John Lucas was dealing with like drug issues
Yep.
and he had been
Yep.
kicked out. But
Yep.
if you go back and look at John Lucas and the way he played during that year, he was good and he made them tough. And then
Yep.
you lose the point guard, and then you got kind of like you got Reed running the point and
Yep.
Wiggins sometimes running the point. And it's like not traditional, and you don't have anybody who can really get the ball to Ralph Sampson and Hakeem in
Elijah.
spots that they wanted to have it in. So therefore it was tough. Now, do I think that the Rockets end up beating the Celtics with John Lucas? No, but I think it would have been a much different series.
Yeah, and it was because of that though that they were able to beat the Lakers, because I think that Reed being 6'9" as well, just like Magic, Magic really had to work a lot harder in that series. Like
Yes.
that Houston team really scared the shit out of me when I was watching those games. Like it was, they had a
Yep.
good like 2 or 3 year stretch where I was afraid of that team. Like, and it was really strictly because of matchups. So like, it didn't help them with the Celtics, but what happened with John Lucas did help them beat the Lakers. So it's also interesting in that point.
It's interesting, just real quick. It's interesting when people think about Victor Wembanyama. I don't say his name is great. Some historian I know compares him to Ralph Sampson and the way he played in his younger years. He was like that's his best comp, and I've been meaning to go back and watch some film on Ralph Sampson from those years.
Yeah,
Because I
that's a
never thought
beautiful
about it.
comp.
It's a comparison. I love that comparison because Ralph could do it all.
I think Ralph
if
didn't
Ralph
shoot
doesn't
as
get
many
injured,
threes.
oh man. Yeah, Ralph doesn't shoot
I
as many
think
threes for sure, but like if he doesn't get injured, he's easily one of the best players ever to play
Of
the
all
game.
time.
Of all time.
Easily.
I'm gonna do a room. I'm gonna do a podcast or room just on that, like the players, the top 5 or 10 players that their careers were
And he
stunning.
had that. Sorry to interrupt you, Malika, but he had that volleyball game winner to like send the Lakers home, right?
Right, right.
Yep.
That was the
Yes,
weirdest
he
game
did.
winner I ever seen.
Heartbreaking. I'll never forget that shot.
Because so far we talked about 3 tonight: Ralph Sampson, Mark Price, and Bernard King. Those are 3 key players right there that careers was greatly. And Ron Harper, like Ron Harper
Yes.
was
Oh,
another one.
yes.
He was man, Ron Harper was talented as heck. He was so good that after his injury, he still helped the Bulls
Win
win 3
3 championships.
championships and then
Yep.
went on to the Lakers and won more championships. So
Yep.
he was still able to contribute. So when Ron Harper, he could have been a really great opponent, of Jordan, and because he was athletic, you know what I mean? Like that's something that his career could have been so different if he didn't get injured. He's another one. But anyway, back to
He was
the back
incredible.
to the, like when we and then the Celtics, of course, they won that series versus the Rockets. That was Hakeem's first, opportunity at the finals. And then we get to 86, 87. Now this was a great Lakers year that year. But the
Great.
Celtics still was on winning 60. They won 67 games. No, I'm still in that year. They won 59 games this year.
Yeah.
So they were right. This was the funny thing is them at 59 was a sign that they were about to go in another direction. But 59 is still a lot of games.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Well, Mikhail breaks his foot in the middle of this season,
Yes, in
right?
Mikhail
January.
breaks his foot in the middle of the season. Yeah,
And
that's
doesn't
what I
miss a
mean. The
game.
And keeps
injuries started
No,
to
he
playing.
don't
pile
miss a game.
He
on.
keeps
Yep.
playing.
Yep.
It destroyed his career because he kept playing on it.
And there was one more thing too. Nope. There was one more thing too. I'm sorry to interrupt. They drafted Len Bias, and he was about to be
Yes.
the next one behind that roster. And then, unfortunately, that situation happened, and we didn't see how Len Bias was going to be as a Boston Celtic.
Mm.
Len Bias, man. Like that one is I did a whole room on Len Bias recently. Just every year. Um like I think about and we will never know. I think part of it is we will never know what the matchups could have been with Reggie Lewis and Len Bias, versus Jordan and Pippen, Horace Grant. We will never know what those matchups could. Those could have been. That could have been a really good rivalry because Len Bias was already polished. Like Jordan became better. Jordan matured as a player. When he got the shackles off of him from leaving North Carolina, and he was able to do his own thing. Len Bias, even though they played different positions, was already like I think his game could have transitioned well, but we will never know because we never got to see him, and it's just heartbreaking. But the thing is, even if he did make it, he was already doing cocaine, so who knows, how long his career would have been if he didn't get the help because he didn't think he was addicted yet. You know what I mean? It was just a party drug at the time. But yeah, Larry Bird was excited for Len Bias. He was excited about. He was willing to come to the rookie camp, attend the rookie camp if, because of Len Bias, like because they were getting older, they were getting injured, they weren't as healthy then. And this is something Detroit doesn't bring up. This is something Detroit doesn't bring up when they talk about how they beat the Celtics, but when they want to talk about how injured they were when the Bulls beat them, no, you don't get that. Anyway, yeah, they did. Yeah, the Celtics were injured, but they still won 59 games that season. They were top three. They were top three again in offense, but their defense took a hit. They were ninth that season, so they were third in net rating, so they dropped a few. They dropped a few there because they were first the previous seasons. So let's talk about this season. This is the season Kevin McHale broke his foot. And they made it to, yeah, and this is the season they lost to that great Celtics team from 87. So let's talk about the great Lakers team from 87. So
And this is the wild playoff run for the Celtics, right? This is the shootout with Atlanta and then the battle with Detroit right
yeah, that
after.
the 7 game series with Detroit. Yeah.
Yeah, that was when Isaiah threw the ball and Larry stole it and gave it to Dennis Johnson for the layup. And yeah, that was that series. Detroit was really good that year, and they had that 7-game series against the Bucks. They faced the Chicago Bulls in the first round. Mike had 63 points in that last year. In the '86 playoffs, and they swept Chicago. They beat Milwaukee in the 7-game series. They beat Detroit in the 7-game series because Detroit was up that game, and then just that bad pass by Isaiah Thomas just kind of just it. Isaiah still talks about it to this day. And then that was also the time when Wadman had that comment was if Larry Bird was just another, brother, then he'd be just another good player. And that's when you kind of seen like
Yes.
the
Yep.
change
Remember
into
that.
yeah, and Isaiah backed Wadman up on that. So there was a big coverage at that time too, as well. Isaiah and Larry came together in the conference and stuff like that. And Isaiah was kind of explaining, because Isaiah had that good reputation in the league and everything as this good guy and all that. And then once that happens and they, did that conference, it kind of got Isaiah into that bad boy type of image, into a bad like reputation from a lot of people after that comment that Dennis Rodman made.
Yeah, and they always tried, the media always tried to bait Larry into talking about it, and props to him, he just refused.
Absolutely. And I think that comment is a big reason why Larry Bird gets disrespected by a lot of people, is because I think that really colors how a lot of people think about him that didn't actually watch him play. Because it's such a blanket statement that it's really unfair. Because like when he was young, he was so athletic, and I don't think what anybody realizes about that is that he was a true equal to Magic Johnson on the court. Like, I mean, those battles were so good because those two were, I mean, just absolute equals. And I remember, like Tommy Heinsohn used to always refer to Larry Bird as like, he's the great basketball brain. And like as a Laker fan, it used to always bug me a little bit because I felt like, they're both him and Magic were, basketball savants. And so it's like, you know, like there was colorism that was going on with both of them, and I think that's one of the reasons that Larry gets disrespected, and he was also, for a lot of white people at the time, he was considered, and even called the Great White Hope,
So they say at that time, and I think like Isaiah Thomas brought this up in one of his recent podcasts. He says the sports media at that time generally was like white men, and it colored the coverage to a certain degree, like even if it wasn't like even if it was only like subconscious.
Absolutely, absolutely, it did.
Yep.
Yeah, so they would always paint like the Celtics played the right way, played smart, and the Lakers were just run and gun, freewheeling.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. And yeah, I'm glad we're on to this year because like this finals was always really really special to me because like it's
It marked an
the start of
important
the
moment in transition. Also, like this was
exactly.
this was an important year. But go
Hmm.
ahead, sir.
Yeah, no problem. I just like I remember this finals so well because I remember watching this finals with my dad's a casual basketball fan. He's not as much of a diehard as me, but he was a Celtics fan at the time. So like we had this little rivalry, like watching this on the couch, and like the the game winner by Magic and his little baby hook shot, and that those final minutes like are just imprinted on my brain. Because like Magic hits that little baby hook, but we leave the Celtics just a little bit too much time. And like I was terrified because I'm like, oh, Bird's gonna hit this. Bird's just gonna hit a three, it's gonna be over. But Bird ends up missing the shot, and the Lakers, end up winning that game, ended up winning the series. That was a game 5. But like, yeah, this series was like awesome and like special to me as a Lakers fan. And yeah, it was kind of the changing of the guard of
Yep.
Larry was fading and like Magic was rising.
It was that comment that Larry Bird said after the game, after he missed that 3-point shot and Magic hit his baby Skyhood, that he said Magic is a great basketball player. Like, he was speechless. Like, after that game, like, speechless. He was just like, man, just unbelievable. Like, he don't even know what to say. Like, after that, like, he gave Magic his pipes, and I was like, wow. Like, he didn't even know what to say. He was just so speechless after that game. So it's crazy.
And the amount of fear the Lakers had of Larry, because when, like you said, when they left him that time, and he walks Worthy up to the wing, and then just cuts to the corner, and like, I don't know, in all the documentaries, you just hear all the Lakers players just like, they all held their breath. They were all like terrified.
Yeah, I jumped off of my couch and I was like, like practically like, biting my fingernails. I was tense. Like I was so tense until that thing clanked off the rim because I was so sure that he was going to hit it.
Yeah, and so after this series, the next year, 87, 88, this is the year they won, they won less games. They won 57 games. So we're at the tail end, and this is the year they lost the Eastern Conference Finals versus the Pistons.
Yep.
Because the Pistons played the Lakers and ended up losing that series.
Yep.
So, like Mikhail, we know Mikhail's, we look at this team, Mikhail's foot wasn't, this is when the Celtics were really injured now. It wasn't just Larry Bird, even though Larry Bird started 75 games. like, but they were, they were getting a little long, you know what I mean? Like Kevin McHale, even though he had an injured foot, his foot would never be the same. He played 63 games. Anything, and you still have Parrish hanging around, and because Parrish was up there by that time. Is there anything that stands out about this one? Because now we're about to get to the years when it's really the end.
So this is really like you said, the decline starts, but there's still moments, right? Like, is this the year with the West Coast trip where Larry plays Portland like left-handed in the first half?
That was 86. That was 86, 87, yeah. This was the year when Dominique and Larry had that amazing duel match in the semi-conference finals where Dominique I think he had 47, Larry Bird had 34. And that was just one of the best duels of all time in that playoff, just them going back and forth, because Atlanta thought that they was going to win. They could have had him in game 6, but Larry said they blew their opportunity and it just set up for that game 7 duel.
Yeah, that's wild. And then I've heard, because the Sonics just are getting started at this point, I think, and then they have there's a real famous story where Larry torches them with the game winner or something. He tells Xavier McDaniel exactly what he's gonna do, which I know he's done all throughout his career, but I guess because I've seen that clip of X-Man talking about it. You could just see the dude just shaking his head.
Yeah, and that was the year they drafted Reggie Lewis too. In that 87 draft.
Yeah, Reggie Lewis was because I just wanted to move us. We've been we're approaching 2 hours. The time really flies when we're talking about teams we love and the times of these teams. Because when we did the Sixers, I swear I kept dropping hints that we needed to get to the closing, and they would not. They just, because the Allen Iverson era, we were talking about the Allen Iverson era, and they just, that room was over 2 hours. They just would keep adding because it's such a great moment in history for the, the AI years, especially when you're talking about the finals with the Lakers, that game. But because that's their championship, right? When you think about it, the fact that they won that game. But here, we're now towards the twilight for the Celtics. like they continue, their wins continue to drop. They go down to 42 games in 88, 89. And they jumped back up at 89, 90, but they were knocked out in the first round by the Celtics. I mean, by the Knicks. And so that, yeah, the Celtics were definitely the Celtics were changing. And then when we get to 90, 91, that was the year, they won 56 games and they lost to the Pistons in the semifinals. And that was the year the Bulls won their first championship.
What was that? Sorry, Malika. Was that first round the Celtics against the Pacers? What
Yes.
was
Yes.
that the year where Larry just smashes his face on the floor
Yep.
and he comes back in the second half?
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. I saw that, like, I was like 10 when that happened, I think. And dude, they showed the slow motion of his just head bouncing off the floor. Like,
Oh my
that's,
God. Oh my God. The
dude,
image
he would
of
be
it.
out for 2 months if that happened now, just off concussion protocol.
Oh,
Yeah.
totally.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. But with the one thing I just remember is just that Larry Bird never looking like the beginning of his career. And then when you get to this time, it's just terrible. Like, to me, like, thinking about it, because when you look at 91, 92, he only started 45 games that year. Um, his back was really, yeah, he was done, like after that time. Didn't he retire after the 92 season?
Yep.
Like, yeah, that was it. Um, but the thing that I remember, one of the saddest things, I remember like a few years ago, I saw an article from, like what Bert was talking about. I think he was concerned about his longevity, how long he would survive, because he's a big man, 6'9" and up, and he was looking at the mortality rates of big men. And he said something like, "We don't last long." And I remember thinking, well, damn, that's a kind of morbid way of looking at things. But like, and I often think, like, in terms of his back, and him playing through some of those injuries, like we did a room last week on the Dallas Mavericks, the Dirk era Mavericks, and we talked about Dirk Nowitzki admitted that he should have retired a few years earlier, and his feet wouldn't be in the condition that they were in, at the, because he still has, like a slight pain in his foot, to this day. Like, how Bird looks upon his sacrifices for the game, um, at that time, when he injured his back and he continued. So that's when I think about Bird, his career was too short, but he still had his impact is felt to this day. And one of the reasons I wanted to have this room is just to pay respect to that era, because when I hear people talk about Bird now, it's like, oh, well, he played in a different, and like, it's like the respect is not there. Like, the players understand Bird was great. Like, LeBron is not shy about how he feels about LeBron himself. Even talks about how great Larry Bird was, and shows him the respect, like Kevin Durant. And you hear these players talk, but fans don't understand. Like, yeah, the game changes, and the game, like the players that play now, the athleticism and the plays, and the style of play is completely different. Every decade, every era has their own style of play. It matures. But I feel like more and more sometimes when I hear fans speak, the respect for different eras is just not there. But in these rooms, we show that respect. So I wanted us to go around, between us, and we can give our last thoughts on Larry Bird, and I will note like close out, noting some of the rooms that will be coming up, including the Bad Boy Pistons and some other things. So, three, you want to start us off with your last thoughts on Bird in that era?
Yeah, I would say I grew up. Magic was my favorite player as a kid, so I didn't. It wasn't until later I learned to appreciate Bird, and then once you just go through the DVDs and the highlights, you just literally just basketball genius. And what made it better, he seemed to just enjoy making people look dumb, like fake passes and making defenders turn around, and passes and nutmeg passes in between the legs, and all the trash talk legendary stories. And to me, I think that just made me kind of almost like I was a kid at the time, but maybe it made me kind of regret that I didn't appreciate it at the time, because you're just a kid, and you like who you like. But yeah, just unreal, man. And then you hear stories from Jackie McMullen said even before he played his first game with the Celtics, he broke his knuckle, and he never told anyone. And it was on, or I don't know if that's true or not. I heard her say it. So
I mean, there were a lot of injuries that players would have, and it just wasn't. It's just a whole different era. Like to now, if that would happen, he's going to be out for a while. I just think it's a different era. Players are getting, people think players are getting more injured now. I think more things are probably being reported. It's, more things are things back in the day that wouldn't keep you out today will be on the injury report. I think that's the difference. I'm sorry, three. Were you done? You want to continue your last point? I guess he's done. Evan,
Well,
go ahead.
I'll go ahead and go. Yeah, I can't remember who to attribute this quote to, but there's a great quote that I always remember. It's Michael will make you look slow, but Larry will make you look stupid. And three touched on that a little bit, and that's that was, yeah, he did take a lot of joy in that. And when I was watching him play, like like in it as a Laker fan, I didn't appreciate it as much because it's he's the hated rival, and just I remember just kind of thinking no, this is no, he's doing it and even when Spike Lee made his comment, I remember kind of just thinking to myself yeah, maybe Spike is right, just because I'm a Laker fan, and out of spite. But after he retired, like you know I was able to kind of think about it and also go back and watch games, and like you know and really kind of just realize that I was wrong. He like I said before, he was an absolute equal to Magic Johnson. And I feel lucky that I got to see him and Magic play. Like, I mean, like just memories that I'll never forget. So I think that, and I think that sums it up for me. So thank you, and thank you for having me up here to speak. I appreciate it, Malika.
No problem. Justin, any closing thoughts?
Thank you so much for this room. I was really looking forward to talking about the Celtics and the label. So thank you so much, Malika, for that. Um, all I gotta say about Label, go on YouTube and go watch the Label Ultimate Mixtape the NBA put out, and you just tell how much of a great player Label was. He's the reason why I'm a Boston Celtics fan, because of his play and everything. And one of the reasons that he said that the NBA was saved, they were on tape delay. They just had a reputation in terms of their image. Magic and Bud came in and saved the NBA. Michael took it to another level, but Magic and Bud, their rivalry and everything they stood for, saved the NBA and gave a lot of eyes to the television. Is my final thoughts.
Thanks for showing up, and as we pay tribute to Larry, this was the era that made me fall in love with basketball. It was watching Magic and Larry. I was a child. I was so little, but my stepfather watched a lot of the game, and that's how I got to love the game. The funny thing is, my stepfather and a lot of my family are Knicks fans. I'm a Nets fan, but it was, I just love the game and I love this era. So I wanted to pay homage to one of my favorite players from this time, because whenever I hear people talk about their all-time lists, Larry gets shaded when I know they didn't watch him. Because if you watched him and if you respected eras, you would understand how Larry helped move the game forward. Each era helped progress the game. And I don't think people understand that. So I use this time in these rooms to just pay homage and respect to players from previous eras. I eventually want to go back in time, but then I'm gonna start even losing more people. But I may record it as a podcast. But my room next week will be focused on. There's a documentary on Last Chance U that's on Netflix on basketball, and I started thinking about some of the great players that come from JUCO. In the JUCO world, we have some players that are in the Hall of Fame that come from JUCO. They came from JUCO, and I just wanted to have a room talking about a different type of room than team rooms, just on how JUCO works, recruiting, playing time, the impact, and the pressure coaches feel getting players contracts. Scholarships to for Division 1, Division 2 schools, and just how that world works. Because Last Chance U, you see how Last Chance U, kind of what they show you what works at Last Chance U. But next week we're going to talk to coaches for the JUCO world, former players. And a current player who's in the JUCO world too has agreed to join us. And we're going to talk about JUCO, Last Chance U. This is a different type of room, talking to people in the know, because I'm just curious about how that world works. But coming rooms on team rooms will be on the Bad Boy Pistons. I got that coming up. I have a room coming up with one of my friends that hosts rooms who's a Knicks fan. We're going to look at the Kristaps Porzingis trade and the impact it had on the Mavericks and on the Knicks. So we're going to look at that trade and Kristaps a little bit, because, man, his career is interesting. And we have more rooms. I'm going to be looking at Dr. J in 2 segments: his time in the ABA and his time with the Sixers, because I think that he had more support on the Sixers versus when he was on the Nets and the ABA. So we do. I tend to have my rooms every week on Thursday for now until football is done, and then I switch back to Tuesdays. So definitely, I'm going to be doing a room with Mahmoud Abdul Rauf's autobiography. I'm currently reading it, so if anybody else is reading it, you can join me for that discussion coming up. The Rise of the Black Quarterback book. That's another one that I'll be discussing finally, because I'm reading it during this break. And the Charles Barkley biography is thick. It's a big book by Tim Bella, but I'm reading, that's a book I'll be reading soon. So each week we talk hoop, we talk about history, we talk about interesting topics around sports, and I'm going to integrate talking about Walter Payton and some football greats as well, because I read his book, which was outstanding, by Jeff Pearlman. It was great. So we need to talk about that. And if you have any ideas, you can inbox me. Is there anything you want to discuss? Definitely inbox me. It's probably something on my list. But I do a room a week, and I have a stack of things I want to talk about. So definitely email me, DM me. But thanks for being here, for joining the Rewind, and see you next week for the JUCO space. Thank you. And I'll retweet it now, because I've just remembered I didn't put it in a Jumbotron, so I'll retweet it. So if you follow me, you can, you can set a reminder for it. The same time though, 8 o'clock next Thursday. Thanks.